Welcome back to the Suck My DFS podcast presented by the Game House. First, I just want to say to everyone listening, thank you for being so patient this week. It has been crazy for my schedule and research trying to get this stuff done. So like I said, I promised an abbreviated version of the Suck My DFS podcast where since I'm without Will, I will be just going through the players to build around and essentially go through my lineup process, stream of consciousness this week. So remember, it's only on the FanDuel main slate, and a couple of reminders. The Tennessee Chargers game, that is overseas in London, and unlike the game last week between the Raiders and the Seahawks, that is not going to be within the FanDuel main slate. So it's not starting at 1 Eastern, starting at 9:30 Eastern. So seasonal plays, make sure you've got those set. If you're picking up guys or making sure trades clear and you have one of those players, make sure, do your due diligence, make sure those are clearing before the kickoff in the morning. So without further ado, let's just get right into this. So there was a huge news that came out yesterday. Huge news. Carlos Hyde traded to the Jaguars, throws a wrench into everything we researched going into this week. Everything you had going into Friday, throw it out once Nick Chubb is announced as the starting running back. And if you don't know why, Nick Chubb is 4,800 on FanDuel. It is now going to take the Carlos Hyde role against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, everyone says, well, the Bucs, you shred them. You shred them through the air. They're one of, if not the worst pass defense in the NFL, and they've been pretty good against the run. Well, I would argue that, that's right. And I would say my counter argument would be that has a team really tried to run the ball on them? If you go back and think, jumped out to an early lead on New Orleans. New Orleans battles back, throwing the football. Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas got their damage done through the passing game. The Eagles just struggled that entire game, could not get anyone going on the ground, could barely get something going through the air. So that was just a good job by the Buccaneers defense as a whole. Then Pittsburgh. James Conner has a very underwhelming performance. Let's go to Chicago. Tyreek Cohen was the star. Jordan Howard barely got any run because they got their damage done through the air, and they didn't really try to run the football. Same thing with Atlanta. Atlanta just knew going in, we're going to throw it all over the yard on this team, but the Browns are a little bit different. The Browns, even since Baker Mayfield has come back, are still top 7 in the league in rushing attempts. This team wants to run the football. That's the identity of Todd Haley, Hugh Jackson at this point. Let's protect our rookie. Let's utilize our backs. And they wouldn't have made this trade if they didn't feel like Nick Chubb and/or Duke Johnson could step in and fill the void that Carlos Hyde has now presented. So it sucks because I was originally building lineups with Mayfield and Njoku because Buccaneers, if you go back and look, while they have not been good against entire passing offense, they've been specifically bad at the tight end. You go back and look at Austin Hooper's incredible performance against the Bucs. Did not see that coming. Once the news of Brait and Howard being active alongside Brait, I was like, oh God, I can't play Brait. So drop Brait most leagues in all the leagues I could. For Hooper, paid off nicely. Didn't have the balls to play him in DFS, though. So, if you're building the lineup, start with Chubb in the flex. 4,800, great value play. This is good chalk. This is absolutely good chalk because on top of Tampa Bay being a relatively soft defense, they're going to be without 2 guys up front, Vinny Curry and Gerald McCoy. Gerald McCoy is an all-pro defensive tackle, top 5 pick out of Oklahoma. He's out. So they are going to have serious problems stopping this Cleveland running attack. And everything I found, Vita Vea is still healthy for the game. He might be questioned, but I can't find anything that says he's unlikely to play. And it took him a while to come back after suffering an injury in the preseason. So we don't even know if Vea is going to be 100% on this defensive line. So I love Nick Chubb. It's good chalk. Eat this at 4,800 because it allows you to do a lot of things. Immediately, cash games, just go to Gurley. You don't have to fight to fit him in anymore. 10,200 means nothing when you can fit in a Nick Chubb in the flex 4,800. Think about this. Nick Chubb, if we're doing this right, 9.6 for 2x. Doesn't even need to score double-digit points. he scores 12, 13, 14, I mean, we're talking about 3x in a cash game at 13 points. That it's too good of an opportunity to pass up. We've seen it with guys like Latavius Murray, Gio Bernard, these value backs who get the green light as the starter. Eat that chalk. And I did not, even with the Dalvin Cook news last week, I didn't pivot to Latavius Murray. I thought, you know what? Nah, not going to do that. Broke my rule. Play the chalk running back. Start with Nick Chubb. Go to Gurley. Man, Gurley is going to be so heavily owned in cash. You can make a case that this is the week it falls off. He just had his best week of the season against the Broncos, where he rushed for over 200 yards by himself. It took the New York Jets 2 players to rush for 200 yards. Gurley said, nah, hold my beer. Watch what I'm about to do. And he did it. But season high in points on FanDuel. So absolutely unbelievable. Now, I'm not saying that San Francisco is some formidable opponent, but what do you think they saw on game film? They saw Todd Gurley running all over the place. And, there was not the same Los Angeles passing game that we've expected. It was cold. It was windy. It was snowing pregame. Now, the snow didn't impact the play at all because, Denver did a great job of getting it off the field. But this was not the normal LA Rams passing attack. And going back to California while they're still on the road, we're going to see more of Jared Goff. So if you're in a tournament, I love fading Gurley, 10,200. That's actually what I'm doing in one of my lineups. Instead of Gurley, I pivoted Goff Cooks because if Gurley's, let's say he just gets 18 points. It's not the worst day ever, but FanDuel, cash games, not enough. If he gets under 20, you're going to win that. You're going to win that game. But so tournaments, I'm going my one tournament lineup, Goff and Cooks. So now that we've got Chubb, we've got Gurley. Where do you go next? Well, let's figure out our wide receiver. Adam Thielen. Adam Thielen on every single lineup. I can make it work. I get my number one receiver, Adam Thielen. I look at how much I have left per position. Okay, let's go find a tight end. I've had terrible luck with tight ends in terms of my process and my selection, so I'm paying up. Right now on my 3 lineups, the 2 cash lineups and the 1 tournament lineup, it is Zach Ertz on both cash game lineups and Eric Ebron on the tournament lineup. So I'm paying up. Minimum $6,800 to tight end with Ebron and Ertz. I've got to lock that in because of all the savings on this slate. So now that we've locked in our number 1 receiver, 2 running backs, and a tight end, let's go to our quarterback. Because now we're going to have to figure out, well, is there a quarterback who we can stack with a value receiver? And I think there are 2 options. One is Joe Flacco. I mean, it's going overlooked because the last 2 games, this Ravens offense has not produced, like we've seen from the first 4 games of the season. But look at this. Tennessee didn't score a single point. Looked like one of the most inept offense. They looked like the Buffalo Bills. One of the most inept offense performances maybe in NFL history. I don't go back far enough to see. But in a game where the Titans scored 0 points, Joe Flacco had 37 attempts. 37 attempts in a game in which their opponent scored 0 times. Now that they're hosting a really good offense in the Saints, and I know Drew Brees is not the same outdoors as he is at the Superdome or even in a road dome game, they're going to push this Ravens defense. I think it's going to be very similar to the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game we saw late September. I think it was Sunday the 30th. In that game, Flacco threw it 42 times. Not the most efficient day ever, 22 completions, but 363 yards, 2 touchdowns for 22.22 points. That's damn near 3x at a $7,500 salary. And I especially like Flacco because if we're looking at, some of these lower budget receivers, here comes Willie Snead. This guy had a very slow start to the season. I believe he couldn't get on the field either the first 2 or 3 games, but he's come alive and he's been very stable. Well, Crabtree and Brown have switched off having the monster games or the touchdown games. Here's what Willie Snead's done the last 3 games. 10 targets, 7 catches, 60 yards. 7 targets, 5 catches, 55 yards. 7 targets, 6 catches, 56 yards. Now, those numbers aren't going to blow you away, but they are damn close to a 2x return on his $5,400 salary. And those have been in games where they haven't been shootouts. In the Pittsburgh game, 8.6, 56 yards receiving. They were actually in control of that game more so than the score indicated. I think Snead, if you're running with Flacco, which I am, I'm running Flacco Snead because Snead at 5,400 is a great way to continue getting some salary relief so you can fit in guys like Zach Ertz, Thielen, and Gurley all on the same lineup. Now, my second cash quarterback, I wanted to pay up for somebody, and I can't go to Derek Anderson or CJ Beathard. I just can't put my money on those guys. If you have the balls to do it and it works out for you, that's awesome. But we're talking about money here. We're talking about income. We're working hard for this shit. I can't put my money on CJ Beathard or Derek Anderson. And what that means is if you have a strong feeling about either of their performances, you need to go bet the line then, especially the Indy line. If you think that Derek Anderson is going to play well, you should be taking the Bills to cover all day long. Maybe you are anyways, but I can't go that low. So now that I've established I'm not going dumpster diving this week, the next quarterback who stands out, and there aren't very many, I think there's only a handful. I was playing around with Cousins because I've got Thielen, the Cousins-Thielen stack against the Jets. Looks good. Andrew Luck on the Ebron lineup, 8,000, 8,200. And then I saw Cam Newton at 8,200. I fit the lineup in with Luck, and I'm thinking, wait a minute. It's Cam Newton. So I went back and looked at some of the rushing totals, and this is what really sets him apart. In a game last week where he was really average, 24.3 points, 27 of 40, 275 and 2, with an interception, but 9 carries for 43 yards. The week before against the Giants, 8 carries for 29 yards. The week before that against the Bengals, 10 carries, 36 yards. They had a bye between that, but the rushing totals have been there. Floor of 29 yards rushing so far, a high of 58 yards rushing, and a rushing touchdown. There are just so many different ways that Cam makes a cash game value on the road to Philadelphia. If my memory serves right, he played very well last year on Thursday Night Football against Philadelphia. I cannot remember if it was at home or away, but he showed up in that game. And if I'm paying up to differentiate, I don't want to go to Goff because it could very well be a Gurley game. And I'm rolling with Gurley in cash, so I'm not going to roll Goff. And Breeze and Brady are just too expensive for being on the road. Brady against Chicago I'm not too worried about, but I don't have a good stack with Brady. Is it Edelman? Is it Gronk? Is this the Josh Gordon game? I don't know. And because I don't have a very clear stack or path to success with those two guys, I'm out. Plus, Breeze and Michael Thomas are just way, way too expensive. Just no way. Way too expensive. So I've settled on Cam as my second quarterback. And in cash, I'm not stacking him with anyone. Funchess is a good option, but I need, especially if I have an $8,000 plus quarterback, I have to find more value. So a guy that I'm playing virtually everywhere, Jermaine Kearse, with Anunwa being out and Kearse seeing an uptick in targets last week against the Colts, who threw the hell out of the ball. What are the Vikings going to do? They're going to throw the hell out of the ball at home. So I think Darnold goes back to Kearse. Kearse at 5,000. Really good price. Especially given the matchup. I don't know, individually, he's not going to see Rhodes because he was working out of the slot a lot. Wow, I should have figured out a better way to say that. But let's say he even, bumps outside, works as a number one. He's not the kind of guy that Rhodes will shadow. They'll just leave Rhodes on one side of the field, and, Darnold may just not look his way when he lines up over Rhodes. He lines up on, maybe it's Trey Waynes who's playing opposite corner of Rhodes, but this is not a guy that Rhodes will shadow. So I love Kearse at 5,000. Really great way to just jam in these top-tier guys like Ertz, like Gurley. And when it came to second running back, that was really the most difficult choice on the slate. Who is the number 2 running back? Because, I considered Kerryon Johnson, especially with the Theo Riddick news. Theo Riddick is out. And he's, hopefully going to presume that role because LeGarrette Blount is not catching passes. It's not something he's really ever done at the NFL level. And Kerryon Johnson, they want to get him more work. At 6,500 in a really good matchup with Miami. Oh, I can't do that. I got burned last week, and it's the whole, even if there's two running backs, you really never know. Chris Carson killed me last week, 6,400 against the Raiders. I thought he was going to pay off, maybe get a touchdown. Got his touchdown called back, but that's what happens when you invest in committees with not a whole lot of statistical breakdown of what the split is. But in the real bad thing is that we know LeGarrette Blount gets the goal line, or at least he's the guy who gets the first shot at it. And I love Kerryon Johnson. I would love to go there, but man, I have to go elsewhere because I like it, but it's not good enough. I was thinking, Carlos Hyde before Nick Chubb, but now that there's, Chubb is the starter, Hyde's shipped out of town. Can't do that for obvious reasons. Let's go down to Kenyon Drake. Detroit's awful against the run. Kenyon Drake got some run at the end of the game last week, especially in overtime. I was surprised how much run he got in overtime. Gore looked really gassed. They went to Drake despite fumbling. Kept him in the game. He had some good runs. I would love to go Kenyon Drake at 6,300, but I can't. Even in the great matchup because of the committee with Gore. Gore is probably going to get the goal line, especially after Drake fumbling on the one. I'd love to roll Jordan Howard again, but it's not that I'm afraid that he burned me last week. It's just not. The matchup's just not there, the approach. But then again, what the hell do I know? I thought I knew how the Bears were going to attack the Dolphins last week. And, when they did it, it worked. But, I cannot get inside the head of Matt Nagy, so I'm just not going to try that. Came down to two guys, LaShawn McCoy, Peyton Barber. 6,200 for McCoy, 6,100 for Barber. I'm going LaShawn McCoy as my number 2 running back. Despite not reaching the end zone at all through the air or the ground, he's gotten a lot of run. 16 attempts against Houston, 5 targets, 24 attempts against Tennessee, 3 targets, 5 attempts against Green Bay, 6 targets. I actually think Derek Anderson coming into the offense will help, will make McCoy more viable because he's absolutely a better option than Peterman. I'm not, informed enough on Josh Allen's performance to say he's a better option than Allen. He certainly doesn't have the athleticism that Allen does. But Anderson has proved, even for entire seasons, that he can be a viable quarterback option. I haven't looked at old film as far as, does he check down a lot? Does he throw to the running backs? But that's what these guys do. When they come in, they like the easy throws, the safe throws early in the game. Those are tight ends. Chuck Clay has been useless thus far, and those are running backs. So I see a scenario in which McCoy gets, 15 carries at a minimum and maybe double-digit targets. Now, that's almost impossible to guarantee for a running back, but the Colts are going to throw it. The Colts are a volume passing team. Andrew Luck, despite his turnover numbers, he's still getting it done. He's still moving the ball effectively. So LaShawn McCoy is the number 2 that I've settled on in my cash lineups and in my one tournament lineup. Let's go to defense. So 2 of the 3 lineups, 1 cash lineup and the tournament lineup, I'm going Jaguars. The Jaguars have lost 2 in a row, 2 road games. One at Kansas City where they got absolutely undressed by Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. And then last week against the Cowboys on the road. And it seems so obvious after the fact, just like most things do, but the strength of Jacksonville is irrelevant or was irrelevant against the Cowboys because the Cowboys, they don't line up and try to beat you on the outside with these receivers. They could give a damn how good Jalen Ramsey is or how good A.J. Bouye is because that's not how the Cowboys run an offense. They pound you. The emergence of Cole Beasley was great, and I think it really was emphasized because of the matchup. They knew we really can't go outside, so we're going to feed Beasley in the slot, which they did. And, I believe DJ Hayden was out that game, so they might have exposed a weakness of the Jaguars, that third corner, that nickel defensive back who comes in to cover the slot. They exposed him. However, this week against the Texans, what do the Texans have? They have flashy, athletic, big play wide receivers on the outside with Hopkins and Fuller. And, say what you want about QT. He's not a thing for production. I'm not touching him. But you know what? The Texans are featuring him in the offense, so I guess he's a thing. But with Fuller and Hopkins on the outside, the Jaguars match up perfectly. And we saw the Bills go into Houston and give this offensive line, this offense as a whole, trouble. Watson, while he does not carry an injury designation heading into this game, I don't think, bruised lungs and cracked ribs heal in 10 days. So he's still going to be banged up, still going to be a little gun shy. And let's look at this from the Jaguars' perspective. They just dropped 2 in a row, including, a loss to Tennessee early in the season, divisional game. They have to go on the road and get this win to stay afloat in the AFC playoff picture. I think after getting one of the worst matchups they could get in the Cowboys, they get probably one of the best matchups that they could get against Houston with this patchwork offensive line and these really good skill players on the outside. Watson's forced to throw a lot. So I love the Jags here. Jags on my cash lineup and Jags on my tournament lineup, because in that tournament lineup, I'm fading Gurley, so I have room to play. So I'll just give you what the tournament lineup looks like. I'll give out both the cash lineups into the podcast, but also as a reminder, if you're listening, I post everything. Everything I'm doing, I've done at thegamehouse.com on Sundays. I have an article that gets updated every 30 minutes, 2 hours before the kickoffs, where if there are any changes to my player pool or my lineups officially, I post them. I update them all the way to 5 minutes before kickoff. So I'm giving you the lineups now. If they change, you will know. As long as you stay up to date, you will know. My third defense on the Cam Newton lineup is the Washington Redskins. The Redskins have a very good front seven, and they can be exposed a little bit on the outside, as the Saints showed that. So the Cowboys get a really poor matchup. They get a team who's 3-4 and really good at stopping the run with Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne and Kerrigan and these guys. I mean, this is not a good matchup for Dallas. I believe, let me double check, I believe that matchup is in Washington. Yes, at Washington. These guys are coming off a giant win against the Jaguars, and they celebrated it heavily. Division on the road. Washington's a 1.5-point favorite. I guess they think these teams are equal. Actually, the Dallas is a little bit better. Maybe it's the public betting it. I'm not so sure. I think Washington's going to win this game outright. They're definitely going to cover the spread, and I think they're going to do a good job of bottling up Zeke and putting pressure on Dak. Now, Zeke is, I don't want to say he's matchup proof, but with enough volume, this dude can produce at cash value, even with, I believe, his $8,400 salary. So I'm running a risk with the Redskins, but $3,500 is the only way I could get Cam Newton on that lineup with Gurley and some of these other guys. So that pretty much wraps up my thought process of how I built my lineups yesterday, this morning, and I'll go ahead and run through all of them. Cash lineup number 1, Flacco, Gurley, McCoy, Thielen, Snead, Curse, Ertz, Chubb, Jaguars. Cash lineup 2, Newton, Gurley, McCoy, Thielen, Snead, Curse, Ertz, Chubb, Redskins. And tournament lineup. So this is from the perspective of I am just completely fading Todd Gurley because I'm not really playing these things to double my money. I'm hoping to score in the top, 3% of lineups, all single entry tournaments, by the way. Jared Goff, Mark Ingram, LaShawn McCoy, Adam Thielen, Brandon Cooks, Willie Snead. I went Cooks because, teams are seeing Robert Woods all over the place, catching short, medium, deep passes, getting these jet sweeps, these end arounds. So from a defensive perspective, yes, you have to honor Cook's speed, but Cooks is where he lines up is more predictable than where Robert Woods is going to line up or where Robert Woods is going to end up in the formation. So I like Cooks a lot, plus he's $200 cheaper. I mean, the guy's faster. The guy's a more polished route runner. He's got a higher pedigree in terms of his talent, and I know talent means shit in fantasy football because it's all about opportunities, but all these teams have seen are Robert Woods producing, whether it's catching the football, running the football. I think Cooks is the optimal play if you're playing a tournament because everyone's going to go to Woods, and you can save $200, go to Cooks. Third wide receiver, Willie Snead. Tight end here is Eric Ebron because I couldn't afford Ertz. And actually, not that I couldn't afford Ertz, but I want the Jags defense in the tournament because I don't think a lot of people will be paying up. I'm off the Colts defense completely because it's not Nate Peterman, it's Derek Anderson. And then, of course, in the flex, Nick Chubb. All right, so, that's going to wrap up this edition of the Suck My DFS podcast presented by the Game House. Once again, thank you all so much for being patient with me this week. Like I said, if I have any changes to my player pool or my lineups, I will post them at thegamehouse.com on my live update article that updates every 30 minutes, 2 hours before kickoff. Good luck and, let's cash this weekend.